Good evening and welcome to this special Faith Nation focusing on education in America. In Washington, I'm Michelle London, in for John and Jenna. Well, homeschooling is the fastest growing form of education in America, with more parents trying to shield their children from classroom culture wars. It's even exploding in the Pacific Northwest. CBN's David Brody traveled to Vancouver, Washington to find out why.
The scenery here in Vancouver, Washington, across the Columbia River from Portland is simply beautiful. A very appropriate setting for what's taking place here.
The whole story is a miracle story, really.
Heidi St. John and husband Jay started their homeschooling venture about 20 years ago. What began as a small, humble homeschool ministry has now outgrown 2 locations thanks to a booming demand.
God just kept putting on our hearts, step forward in faith, and I will bring the people and the resources, and he's done that.
Boy, has he. When COVID hit, so did a rush of parents and their kids to the homeschool center, causing it to almost quadruple in size. A new building was needed to house the demand, but it carried a hefty price tag that only God could meet.
We didn't have $16 million. And so we took it to the Lord. And we at one point, actually several points along the way, we brought families over here to pray for the building. People walking the perimeter of this building, putting their hands on the bricks, and just saying, Father, you see what's happening to your children. We need your help. We need your help.
And he showed up in a mighty way, enough money in full so they could move forward debt-free.
Nothing is impossible for God.
And so far, the miracle has led to this. Hundreds of students, close to 200 parent teachers, some who lost their jobs during COVID, a huge auditorium, coffee shop, bookstore, and of course, a couple hundred classrooms with everything from the basics to woodworking to dance. Instead of a regular school, it's more like a newer, bigger model of a homeschool co-op. This is about matching kids' interests with parents' teaching expertise so students can have more light bulb moments. Ultimately, it's about community.
When you're around people that are amongst the same mindset as you, it just it emboldens you, and it makes you it validates that I'm not alone.
So why was this homeschool miracle needed in the first place? Well, today's culture, especially in the Pacific Northwest, is the main catalyst, and the students understand what's happening.
The public school system is having a really hard time right now, and they're teaching a lot of things that are not true and things that kids should not be taught. And
the numbers back that up, showing Americans losing faith in public schools. A Gallup poll reveals an all-time low of just 26% of Americans who have a great deal of confidence in them. A separate poll shows that nearly half of parents who homeschool their children believe public school systems are influenced by too much liberal and woke culture viewpoints.
You would never pack your child a sack lunch and send them to the front lines of a literal war. You would never do that. And yet every single day, we give hundreds of thousands of students sack lunches. We pat them on the head and we put them on little yellow school buses and they take them to the front lines of the culture war.
The St. John's know firsthand that the homeschool plunge can be daunting.
I was the mom who was like, what woman in her right mind, right, would want to stay home with their kids for 18 years when a yellow bus come taken away for free, right?
But then they saw the effect on their child at the time, which led to prayer and a conversation.
And I'm kind of leaning over him, wake up, wake up. And he woke up. I said, what would you think if we homeschooled our kids? And you remember what you said?
I said, who are you? What have you done with my wife?
All kidding aside, it's a rough road.
It is a hard venture. We're not, we know that it's tough. But everything that has value costs something. And so if it was easy, it probably wouldn't be valuable.
Parents of public school kids definitely have concerns about what their kids are experiencing. So maybe there are other ways to fight the good fight.
They will say, well, look, what if I volunteer at the PTA? What if I run for school board? What if I try to make a difference there in the secular world?
Yes, we do advocate people get in the school board. We do advocate that Christians teach in public school. We just don't see how it's going to be saved.
They hope this model they've created here in the Pacific Northwest will be the way forward across the country.
This does seem like a model that could be modeled around the country in all different places.
Absolutely. We're contacted every week by people asking, how do we do what you're doing?
If God can do it here in the Pacific Northwest, then he can do it anywhere.
For those who want to homeschool and build community, the St. John's are a model for what can happen and how God can work. David Brody, CBN News, in Vancouver, Washington.
Coming up, how some states are helping students tackle serious school challenges by tapping into their spiritual side. From gender identity to mental health struggles, students today face all kinds of serious challenges. To help with that, several states are allowing volunteer chaplains to serve as counselors in public schools. Among them, Florida, where Governor Ron DeSantis signed a measure into law. Charlene Aaron reports on this growing trend.
After this law takes effect July 1st, the process will begin as volunteer chaplains apply and undergo background checks. Then it will be up to school districts, individual students, and their parents to take part.
No one's being forced to do anything, but to exclude religious groups from campus, that is discrimination. You're basically saying that God has no place. That's wrong.
And it's a great thing. My dad was a preacher. I'm a preacher's kid, and it's great.
More than a dozen states have proposed measures to allow chaplains in public schools.
17 states are involved in chaplain legislation. Just recently, it passed out of both houses of Louisiana. We expect it to be sent to the governor soon. It's happening around the country because it is so needed.
Florida House Speaker Paul Renner believes chaplains can possibly offer alternatives for students, pointing out that guidance counselors in the state had allowed and even encouraged students to transition to the opposite sex without their parents' consent.
They were giving them different clothes to wear, changing their name without ever telling their parents. And if this is the kind of guidance they're getting from guidance counselor, I think it's about time we have a different perspective in the middle of the school that does respect our values.
This push for chaplains comes as mental health issues among students are growing and schools face a shortage of counselors. According to the American School Counselor Association, the disparity for the 2022-2023 school year came in at a ratio of 385 students to 1 counselor. The recommended number is 250 to 1. Rocky Malloy leads the National School Chaplains Association.
I got news of 2 children that committed suicide. One was in 8th grade, one was in 10th grade. And it's schools that did not have chaplains. The chaplain's role is to prevent that type of calamity from happening.
In 2023, Texas became the first state to allow school chaplains to help counter a decrease in qualified mental health professionals and growing teacher burnout.
The idea that our teachers now are experiencing high levels of trauma and PTSD, that is something new that's happening in education, and our teachers need support. Chaplains are great to help our teachers through this.
Texas Board of Education member Julie Pickren says chaplains have also resulted in making schools safer.
A chaplain in Texas was key in one of our school districts at noticing what was happening with the students and what was going on with these young girls, and brought it to light to the sheriff and was instrumental in identifying this human trafficking ring in a school district in Texas.
Critics, however, claim chaplains could do more harm than good. One concern being their only requirement is passing a background check, and that schools notate a chaplain's religious affiliation. The American Civil Liberties Union of Florida stating, public schools are not Sunday schools and chaplains are not school counselors. Allowing chaplains to assume official positions, whether paid or voluntary, in public schools as counselors or other support staff will undermine this right by creating an environment ripe for evangelizing and religious coercion of students in violation of the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. A claim Renner disputes.
The Constitution prohibits the establishment of a religion, for example, forcing us all to be Catholic or Baptist. It does not in any way, shape, or form, despite a lot of effort to say otherwise, prohibit the free exercise of religion. And so the left has done a good job of trying to get Christians out of the public life altogether.
Meanwhile, in Oklahoma, the Satanic Temple is seeking to take advantage of this movement, threatening to deploy its ministers into schools if the state approves a measure allowing chaplains. That's something the state's education chief, Ryan Walters, strongly opposes, saying Satanists are not welcome in Oklahoma's schools.
60 years ago, they said they did something. They said, we don't need God or spirituality in school. Look where it took us to today. God is back. The chaplain is the perfect person. They're the spiritual source of a school.
Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
School shooting survivors in their own words, writing letters to future survivors, all in an effort to overcome severe trauma. That story and more still ahead.
Get the How to Believe for Healing collection, including a special exclusive teaching from Gordon Robertson.
For whatever reason, deep within my spirit, I prayed, Lord, how about now? Can I rely on you now?
Gordon's personal stories were honest, they were humble, they were incredibly dramatic.
I felt more hopeful about seeing healing within my own life.
When you read the names of God, you're literally talking about his very essence.
Take this opportunity that God is giving you through these teachings and learn about healing miracles.
The best part for me was when we realized that God chose us and he trusts us.
Receive your exclusive video, workbook, and special teaching when you become a CBN partner. Call or go online today.
PTSD, anxiety, and depression. These are just some traumatic symptoms suffered by school shooting survivors. In America, there's more than 100,000 of them. Jenna Browder brings us a look at how to meet the needs of these victims and their communities.
My name is Jackie Hegarty. I'm a survivor of the Sandy Hook school shooting.
My little sister, Jackie Gassidas, was 9 years old when she was killed in a shooting at Robb Elementary in Uvalde, Texas.
School shooting survivors in their own words.
My name is Heather Martin, and I'm a survivor of the shooting at Columbine High School in 1999.
Writing letters to future survivors.
Over the past 10 years, I've struggled with PTSD, anxiety, and depression.
And these struggles are common, with research showing higher antidepressant use among those exposed to school shootings. These events also lead to a drop in enrollment and decline in average test scores. And students exposed are less likely to graduate high school or go on to college.
What we do is, how do we help those communities in the first days and weeks after a tragedy, but then help them with the longer-term recovery efforts that those that were impacted by the event.
Researcher Melissa Breimer directs terrorism and disaster programs at the renowned UCLA Duke National Center for Child Traumatic Stress. She played a key role in Newtown, Connecticut after Sandy Hook.
Can you talk a little bit about that? What did that look like?
With Sandy Hook, they're in what's called Newtown School District. And so we created a program for the entire school district. So we had mental health supports in Sandy Hook, plus the other elementary schools, the intermediate, the middle school, and high school. So we needed to map which students might be more at risk. Were they a sibling of one of the students who died? Did they are cousins, or did they have a close relationship? Were they maybe in the vicinity of where the shooting took place, or had to be in lockdown? Or do they know kids that experienced that?
For kids specifically, what does the support look like for them after a school shooting?
Initially, we're wanting to think about what current needs do they have since they experienced this shooting. Do they have questions about what actually happened? And you might think that if a child went through an event, that they would understand what happened. But if you're in lockdown, you only have a snippet of what you experienced from that vantage point. So they might have questions about, is my best friend okay? Were you guys okay as a family? And so addressing those safety questions, helping them to understand what might be happening in the next days to weeks. When school will resume, where it might resume, and what might be different when school starts. If there's more police presence, if there's a change to the schedule, kids need that kind of support. Over time, we know that most kids will heal, but some may need trauma or grief treatments. And we make sure that schools have the training and are able to implement these treatments so that kids can get those types of supports.
And Breimer says it's not just students, but families as well.
My beautiful 14-year-old Gina was murdered at her school on February 14th of 2018.
Tony Montalto lost his daughter in the Parkland, Florida school shooting.
Our 17 families that had a loved one murdered that day at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School banded together because we realized that things needed to change. The status quo was not acceptable.
He's now president of Stand with Parkland, which focuses on these main areas: securing a school campus, improving mental health screenings and support programs, and responsible gun ownership.
The last 5 years, we've passed 7 school safety laws here in Florida. We've helped pass 4 additional federal school safety laws, including the Fix NICS Act, which worked on some background check issues, Stop School Violence Act, which created behavioral threat assessment teams in many schools and provided dollars for hardening the campus.
Breimer wants change as well. In addition, she would like to see bereavement services for kids experiencing grief, support for families navigating social media in the wake of these tragedies, and suicide prevention programs.
Sometimes people give up hope because they've experienced these events. And so what we've also looked at and made sure that we highlighted it is supporting, making sure that there's suicide prevention programs in the schools, helping with identifying kids or adults who are at risk because of these events, and making sure that they get help.
I wish someone would have told me that even after a year, I still wouldn't feel like my old self.
And while there is hope for these survivors, getting there is a process that requires support and resources.
You'll never be the same, but you'll learn to live with this. Quite honestly, I'm not there yet. But with the support from the people that you know and love, you'll get there eventually.
From studying the Bible to taking on textbooks. Up next, how churches in Florida are picking up the responsibility of teaching Black history. The plight of Black Americans is a difficult yet inescapable part of American history. But the interpretation of that history is now under fire in states like Florida. Schools there have scaled back what they're teaching. But as Hillary Powell reports, that's leading some churches to step in to educate.
Female faith leaders tell me they're on the front lines of instruction, stepping in to fill a need, teaching Black history at churches, right alongside Bible study.
I vividly remember what happened to me when I tried to integrate a public school system. I mean, I was spit on, I was called the N-word every day, I was beaten, and those things happened not hundreds of years ago. I'm talking 1965.
75-year-old Dr. LaVon Bracey's memories of being part of integrating the Alachua County, Florida school system are a painful yet indelible part of her past.
It's uncomfortable, but it happened. And we need to actually talk about it.
Now she's once again breaking barriers, teaching African American history inside churches with a growing demand. That's in response to the Florida Board of Education approving new guidelines in 2023 for its kindergarten through 12th grade African American history curriculum. The required changes came about following a 2022 law Governor Ron DeSantis dubbed Stop Wrongs to Our Kids and Employees Act, or the Stop Woke Act. One part of the curriculum drew widespread attention for stating, quote, instruction includes how slaves develop skills, which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit. Before going to Washington in 2011, Florida Congresswoman Frederica Wilson served as an elementary school principal who helped urge the state legislature to pass a 1994 law mandating Black history be taught statewide. A founding member of the Florida African American History Task Force, she calls the new guidelines an alarming departure from educational standards. In a statement to CBN, she says, quote, "We cannot afford to whitewash history and deny future generations the knowledge needed to build a more just and equitable society." Adding, "I fully support what our churches are doing to preserve that history."
So I took it personal. We also realized that history still sits in our pews in the Black church.
Reverend Rhonda Thomas leads the organization Faith in Florida, which created the History Toolkit for churches that's taken off. Nearly 400 houses of worship, including Protestant, Catholic, and mosques across 29 states, are teaching Black history using the toolkit. Haters have also taken note. Thomas tells CBN News she's received death threats.
It did not detour us, but it did empower us.
Because she sees history being on her side. Even before slavery ended, some churches in the North doubled as schoolhouses for freed Black people. After emancipation, many churches opened their doors to educate former slaves, helping boost Southern Black literacy from 5% in 1870 to about 70% in 1900. Ministers like Orlando pastor Sharon Riley see the present work as preserving that history. She hopes the lessons taught to her young parishioners will get them energized to vote.
We wanted to be sure that our students understood, especially on that high school level, that they understood everything that went into giving us the right to vote. It's also instilling in them a sense of responsibility as citizens in our country.
Reverend Thomas adds that while the past can't be rewritten, it can shape the future by using history to soften hardened hearts.
In fact, in some of our churches, they teach it, the Black history class is larger than the Sunday school class. So it's reaching the unchurched.
In Washington, Hillary Powell, CBN News.
All right, that's going to do it for Faith Nation. Have a great night.